Travel and things in association with Sun Destinations, iconic destinations with amazing experiences, present in conversation with. I am your host, David Batsoffen, and I'm joined today, and I'll introduce you to him in a moment. If you go to a theatre production and you see this on stage, flip charts specifically, then you know that the man that is about to step on stage and present you with an afternoon or evening of untold hilarity has to be Alan Committie. And this is his new work, 27th stand-up in 27 years. And I welcome him back to In Conversation with. Al, how you doing?
Captain Beardy, this is a delight. It's always a pleasure to be back with you, and it was a real pleasure to see your face quite close to the stage, if I'm honest, in the second row at yesterday's matinee.
That's because my wife was going to join me and she has to lip read you as well, but you speak too fast for her.
Correct. I
So
speak too fast for myself sometimes, to be fair.
you do indeed. Comedy Gold. Firstly,
Mm,
congratulations. 27 stand-up performances in 27 years.
yeah.
And I remember last year when I spoke to you about your production, then I'd said to you that it was the best to date. But yesterday, I was absolutely blown away. You get incrementally better every year that I see you.
Wow, that's a very kind thing for you to say, and coming from you, that means a lot. You and I've had a long history of working together, mostly in television, but certainly talking a lot about theatre. And there is a kind of inbuilt personal pressure that you put on yourself,
Hmm.
and of course from people like Pieter Toerien, who tells me every year, "Well, this was brilliant. So what are you going to do next year?" And as I near that moment, of December of the year, and I have to present the show, I kind of think, oh, you have that moment of self-doubt. You think, well,
Hmm.
maybe this one won't work. But we live in interesting times. Let that be the understatement of the morning. And those interesting times give us much fodder and grist, for material. And I suppose if you can find the right angles and the right perspectives, there's a lot to talk about out there. The biggest fear for a comedian, of course, is that you've just said everything that you have to say. And in a way, I even mentioned that in the show. I kind of say you try and write new stuff,
Hmm.
but invariably news recycles,
It
literally
does indeed.
regurgitates itself, and subjects that I've become fond of talking about over the years will keep presenting new and interesting possibilities around it. So, for example, rental vehicles, because I spent so much of my life in cars that are not mine, and let's be honest, cars that are entry level. Let's be
Yes.
euphemistic about it. I get to drive some of the worst vehicles in the country, and I get to tell the audience about what they're like. And this year was no different. I honestly didn't think I was going to talk about a rental car. And then I was in KwaZulu-Natal, going up to the Drakensberg in a Renault Kwid automatic, and the material literally wrote itself in real time. As I was experiencing the drama, I kept thinking, this is going into the show. This is going into a show, as angry as I was.
And luckily or unluckily for you, there was a young lady sitting directly in front of me who drives a Renault Kwid. So you
Well,
could play off her for the rest of the afternoon, basically.
I mean, the honest truth is, we were all surprised she had made it to the theatre in her Renault Quid. So that in itself was an achievement worth, celebrating. But yeah, it's a delight. As always with my shows, as you know, there's a range of topics, and I try and bounce fairly quickly from one to the other.
Mm.
So if there's an area that I'm covering that might not be of interest or of humor to an audience member, something else will come along fairly shortly. And the idea is that you talk about a gamut of things, but that you then link them, A, with a structure that is pre-prepared, but B, by sewing in the information that I'm gleaning from the audience. So I try and talk to between 5 and 8 people, sometimes more, sometimes slightly less. And whatever they shared with me, including the lady who now we know drives the Renault Quid, that then becomes a kind of tapestry that's interwoven into the structure of the show. And it's what makes each performance so unique.
You do what only one other stand-up comedian that I know of does, and he's Dara O'Brien.
Oh,
And he
amazing.
does exactly what you do. And at the end of the show, you go through all the people that you've interacted with just to prove that A, you were listening, And B, you
Yes,
can still
yes.
remember who they are and what they do for a living.
And then the caveat of that is that that goes out of my mind by the time I've reached the dressing room, because I've only got enough disk space for that show, and then it's got to be cleaned for the next performance. So sometimes I'll be talking to people in the foyer, and I can see them looking, and I go, "Oh," and they'll say, "No, I'm Clara. I'm the pediatrician," and I'll go, "Oh, right." Meanwhile, that was 20 minutes ago in the show. It's already gone from my mind, I'm afraid.
How long does it take to put a show like this together? It's about 90 minutes, give or
Yeah.
take a
So,
few
so
minutes.
we do two versions of it. The Cape Town version, because it's over the festive season, and it's at a theatre that has no shops, no bars and restaurants around it. Theatre on the Bay. We have an interval, so that shows is effectively 2 hours, and
Wow,
then I
okay.
do. Yeah, so when I come to Monty, it's
Oh,
I
so
think it
we get
behoves it.
shortchanged here. Is that what you
Well, you do, but I think
half
you
an
get this.
hour?
I think you get the rehearsed version of the show. It's as slick as it's going to be, and B, I think it's as tight as it can be. And sometimes you have to pad the Cape Town version when I'm first starting it, as I'm trying to still find the shape and
Hmm.
the nub of the show. But the Joburg version, I mean, I'm now sitting. I said to a friend yesterday after the show, I feel like I'm sitting in the best version of this particular performance of Comedy Gold, and it's a lovely space to be in. This show, I mean, I'll come back to the answer to your question, but maybe I can start by saying that the birthing of a stand-up show, and it's the best analogy. Sometimes it's an easy birth and everything goes smoothly, and the baby comes out and it's beautiful and it's healthy, and the mother is feeling relaxed. Other times, I'm told it can be a painful and literally laborious process that takes days and weeks and leaves everyone worse aware. And I, this one, weirdly enough, as much as I'm loving it now, I struggled initially. I had lots of bits that were working, and I thought I had a superstructure or an overriding theme that kind of supported that. But I made a cardinal error, which I've not done for many, many, many years. And I'd like to think that with my experience, I'm quite good at avoiding those errors. And that was assuming that an audience would know something that we all were on the same boat about it. And that was the movie Wicked. Now, I just referenced it in a line at the beginning of the show. But in Cape Town, when I started it, it was a whole sketch. It was me bodybuilding, lifting fake weights to the sound of Defying Gravity, and then
Right.
putting on a Hulk green mask, and then getting on the barbells and flying off like a witch. To me, hilarious, a brilliant opening. What I didn't know was that no one in the audience had watched Wicked, and the blank faces that met me for the first 4 nights, I didn't give up. Oh, I kept trying. I kept saying, tomorrow night they must have. And after 4 nights, I realized, no, in fact, I am clearly part of a smaller theatre group where everyone has watched Wicked and delighted in it, but it's not maybe true for the general public. And so
Right.
that was interesting. And that threw me for a while. It took me a couple of weeks to then replace things and find a better opening. Once I did, and it was just a shift of two pieces of material and topics, and suddenly everything kind of fell into place. And from there, it was easy to accelerate the what I call the polishing process, which
Mm.
is always in front of an audience and working out what's the least number of words you can use in a joke before it's still while it's still funny, or which joke is a that I mean you're a stand-up as well, so you understand this, that you can do two things. Some comics work with what I call, let's say, in a minute of performance, they'll have 7 out of 10 jokes, and they get three big laughs. The other way to do it, and this is my kind of modus, is in a minute I will do two fours, a five, a six, an eight, and a 10. So the laughs will build and build and build, but there's a laugh literally every 5 or 6 seconds. And the idea is that even the ones that are slightly weaker, maybe they're slightly punny or they wordplay, that they build a bubble of laughter that then gets released in a big punchline,
Yeah,
at the end of that bit. And so it's interesting to work out that puzzle and to understand. It's literally mechanics. It's a bit of comic engineering, if you will.
it is
And so,
indeed.
yeah, so to come back to the original question,
There was a
I
question.
spend the creating process is I spend 10 months just making random notes on my phone or on pieces of paper.
Mm.
Anything that I hear, a thought, a meme, a funny conversation, a joke I've been told, anything. If there's no editing around that. It's anything and everything. It doesn't even have to be funny. It can be something quite serious and perhaps even tragic. But it'll remind me of what was spoken about, what people have been circling as topics, but it also is often the beginning of a joke or a potential joke. And then as I approach the writing period, probably with about 3 weeks before I start writing, so 6 weeks out,
Mm.
I'll start looking at it and going, that's something that could. And then I start seeing patterns. Oh, those 5 things are all about fitness. Oh, this is all about mental health. This feels like it's all about the world politically. And so I can start putting them into little sections. By then, I've also decided on, and this is I'm not sure if you're a young comic out there, this is the way to start. But I start with the title and the poster because that puts the pressure on me. Once the poster's up, I
Yeah.
have to do the show.
You've got
So
to, you've got to come up with the goods.
exactly. So once I've got the title, that's also a way that I can hang sometimes very, let's call it, uh, you know, suspiciously hang a topic onto that theme.
Called a
Um,
tenuous link in radio.
Tenuous was the word I'm looking for, exactly, very tenuously. But it does give me a framework, and then so I'll do that for a couple of weeks, very gently and kind of sporadically in the day, and then I spend 2 weeks kind of writing bits. And then it's about just sitting down and sometimes an hour, sometimes two, depending on how easily it comes, trying to craft what I think would be the beginning and end of a comic bit, like the car rental or flying or Airbnbs or whatever it is. And then, of course, I will meet with Chris. And that period is only a week. It's about 7 days, 8 days that we meet, probably for about 3 hours every day. And
You're
I
talking
talk through
about
the
Chris
material.
Weir, who has
Chris Weir.
previously directed you, but in this one, he's your coach, I noticed
That's right,
on the
exactly.
poster.
And I think handed out some light steroids as well when needed. Um, yeah, so then Chris sits, and I essentially just talk it out to him, almost in performance style. And as you talk, of course, you realize, oh, that doesn't sound so lacquer in the mouth,
Mm.
or that doesn't quite work, or what you think is a gloriously funny joke is met with a blank stare and a question from Chris going, I don't understand, in which case you immediately know the joke's not working. So so those are good moments. And then what he does, which I think is always so brilliantly helpful, is he will just ask you to lift certain words or to find a key word. Because essentially, what a stand up is doing is trying to clue the audience in the setup what they're
Mm.
looking for to laugh at. So, for example, I mean, I can't give an example maybe out of the show, but I could I could say, do you know what's frustrating about bank queues? Or do you know what's irritating about bank queues? Or do you know what makes me so angry about bank queues? Now, that word angry, irritating, and frustrating will give you three
Trigger,
different kinds
yeah.
of laugh, depending on what I want them to pick up. So the frustration is this, and they go, oh, I know, I feel frustrated. But if I said what makes me angry, I've now got to find a thing that I think will make them angry, if that makes
No,
sense.
it does indeed, because there is one setup that you did yesterday in the show.
Right.
And I don't want to give it away, but it's a very obvious setup, and you know where it's going. And the
Yes.
audience laugh. You literally turned around and walked away from the joke because you said there's
Exactly.
some jokes that just don't need a punchline. All you got to do is
Correct.
stand up and walk away because
Correct.
the audience, and it was a full house at Monty for
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
afternoon performance at Peter Toerien's place. And they got it. There wasn't even a
Yeah.
question of where you were
Yeah.
going.
No, that's a beautiful. I mean, and that's also the fun, as you know, is finding different kinds of jokes. So sometimes you set them up on a way that they think they know what the punchline is, and
Yeah.
then you reverse it. Sometimes, and there's a nice little joke that I do where you just change the topic so completely, and I can give this one away where I talk about the American voting and saying now there was talk that there's been inconsistencies and inaccuracies with the polls and margins of error. Now they think I'm talking politics, and then I turn that by going, when I think margins of error and inaccuracies with polls, I think Marnie Libok. So your joke turns you somewhere else, and there's a surprise there that, oh, now we're talking rugby and we can go there. And so that's also quite fun to manipulate and play with an audience like that.
But now you also did something, and I'm going to do a comparison, but it's not really a comparison. I recently saw My Fair Lady, and Mark
Right.
Richardson in that plays Alf Doolittle, and he does a song
Brilliantly.
that is
Mm.
brilliant. And he gets to the end, and he's got his hands on his knees, and he can barely breathe. You did a piece on the ANC yesterday. A, how you remembered it, and B, how you got through it, because you almost got a standing ovation for that.
Bless you. So
Because it is
that's
hysterically funny, and it just gets
yeah,
more and more involved and not
convoluted,
colluded, convoluted, and
convoluted. Yeah,
colluded,
and colluded and colluded.
and
The truth of the
colluded.
matter is, that's one of my favorite things to. So that's an old comic trick, which is double talk,
Yes.
and it's not actually learned. I mean, there's obviously lots of preparation in some of the jokes, and you know exactly what how the structure and what the wording of a joke is. But that one, the secret is to find is to talk as much as you can without breathing and without stopping, trying to make what sounds like sense but is clearly not sense. And all you have to do is keep doing the opposite of the verbs and opposites of nouns. So people coming together singularly in a group at the same time later than you would think was earlier, but not available what time, and you just keep going and you add, and the quicker you can do it. So it's slightly different every night. And my aim is to keep going until they clap. So sometimes they get it very quickly and they clap after 15 seconds, and sometimes I'm doing it for 45 seconds. It's very funny.
There was a fun moment in the show that I saw where you asked one of the audience members for was it an adverb? Adverb?
A
You said
verb, a verb.
a verb. It's a doing word. You a doing
Doing
word. And he sat and looked at you for the longest time before he came up with something. Is there ever a time where where you've just gotten, hang on, he may not get it, so let me just, or they may not get it,
Yes,
let me just move on to
yes,
somebody else.
yes. Oh, many times. And in fact, the night before, on Saturday night, I asked he was a mechanical engineer who had already appeared in the show as a kind of chatting person. I said to him, give me a verb. And he looked very proud. He went, yes. And I went, I can see why you've become a mechanical engineer.
Sometimes the material writes itself. Have you ever,
100%.
have you ever been caught where somebody said, I'm a neurosurgeon,
Mm.
and you can't really tackle them because they have an important job to play, or
No,
a
well,
first responder, something like
yeah.
that. You don't
So
want
none of
to.
those, I don't, I think all of those are, in fact, I've had a first responder, I've had a surgeon. The ones that get you are when they say things like, I'm an oncologist and I work with cancer patients for their last dying days before. And then you think, oh, well, this is a lovely thing to bring into a comedy show. So that can
I'm
be
a
tricky.
palliative
Or
care specialist.
correct. I'm an NGO and I look after AIDS babies in their final weeks. And then you think, okay, well, but then the joke is to talk about how difficult it is to joke about that. So you've always got that level to work on. You can just joke about, well, this isn't going to be funny,
Yeah,
and try and exit. You in those instances, the idea is to exit on a laugh as quickly as possible,
and move on.
without, yeah, and exactly, so just something a little more fun.
Because again, you had two interesting people yesterday.
Yeah.
Or on the Sunday performance that I saw, you had somebody who was a competition analyst,
Oh yes,
and then you had a
yes,
tax avoidance person.
correct.
And I'm
Yes,
sort of going,
it,
where, what, who, how?
it's amazing how, and it is a thing that delights me because obviously, there's lots you can do with doctors and plumbers and
Yeah.
teachers. But I am also lucky enough, and invariably they're out there. Everyone's got an interesting job, and if you can draw out, I mean, the other one that was interesting yesterday was the guy who flies executive jets,
Yes.
private jets, and he was very proud of that and wanted to chat for far longer about it than I think we were prepared to hear. Um,
Well, you sat down and opened a newspaper,
yes,
got a cup of coffee. I'm ready to
I
talk.
the one that interested me was in the final week or the second last week in Cape Town, where a guy, and I can remember where he was sitting in the second row to my right. I said, "What do you do?" He said, "Well, you're going to love this." I said, "Go on, try me." He said, "I make the instruments for gynecologists. I'm not a gynecologist. I make his instruments." Well, we stayed with him for a long time. There was lots to unpack.
Did he bring literally and figuratively? Did he bring tools with him to show you,
Well,
like a show and
exactly,
tell?
exactly.
Is there a big difference? And I suppose this is a question that's asked of you often because you've performed in both Cape Town and
Yeah.
Joburg. But let me switch this for once.
Okay.
Is there a difference between the audiences in KZN and
Mm.
Johannesburg?
Um, I think for me, because I've played relatively so much more in Joburg than in KwaZulu-Natal. Certainly in theatres. I mean, I do a lot of corporates in
Yeah,
Natal, but I certainly don't do theatres. The last theatre run I did there was maybe 10 years ago. That's the honest truth.
really.
Yeah, and part of that, I mean, I'm ashamed to say it, is that it's so risky financially. You don't
Yeah,
know from and all the all my comic buddies and my mentor like Mark Banks told me this years ago, but Lottering will tell you, Rabinowitz will tell you, Stuart Taylor. They go there in 1 year, it's a huge success, and then the next year they play to no
died.
one. And
Yeah.
yeah, and and we know that from the big concerts that have stopped going there, and so invariably I'm averse to it, and my year tends to fill up quite quickly. Having
Mm.
said that, it's ridiculous, and I should go back there. So to answer your question, because I haven't played there as much, I feel less confident. I don't know the area well enough. I don't know the touchstones of the people.
Yeah.
I grew up in Joburg. I've traveled between Joburg and Cape Town all my life for almost 6 months both ways,
Mm.
and so although Cape Town is currently home, Joburg feels home to me, and I
Yeah.
know areas and I know what people talk about, and it is slightly different to Cape Town, but I know what those differences are, and it doesn't freak me out.
And
So
then
yeah.
no, and then with corporates. Now,
Mm,
I've done corporates, and I know sometimes if it's a forced corporate,
yeah,
the attendance is mandatory. They will
correct.
sit there and peer at you and go, "All right, make me laugh. I
Exactly.
don't I don't
Yeah,
want to make me." Or they
yeah,
wait for the boss to respond. And if he
correct.
doesn't, they don't. And if he
Yeah,
does, they do, or even more, because they want to be seen as being supportive of him. But for
correct.
you on stage, it can be very hard, I should imagine,
Yeah, it
to
can be.
get get everybody on your side and let them realize that it's just a fun morning in the away from the office type of thing.
So it's a shift in attitude from the performer. I think that's the first thing. You've got to be very clear. I mean, to sound a bit wanky about it, you need to know what your outcome is going to be, from
Right.
this performance. So for me, when I'm performing in my own shows, a number of things that have happened. Someone has gone onto a website, paid a lot of money, organized a babysitter, traveled through potholes, ignored the load shedding schedules, gone and bought some expensive food, paid for parking, and is now sitting in my theater. That's nine steps they've already taken. They are 70% of the way to enjoying themselves because they're taking a risk that they've come there. So I can showcase, I can enjoy, I can share their joy back at them, and that bubble is a
Mm.
lovely thing to manipulate. For all the reasons you've just said, a corporate is the opposite. They don't know me a lot of the times. They are busy with in their mind space or their head space in other areas. They're still sitting in business, and I'm there. So my job there is to bring energy, lightness, and smooth transitions. If I'm emceeing in comedy, or if I'm just doing a comedy, to bring energy, not laughs. I don't look for laughs. Whatever laughs I get are bonus. I
Mm.
want them just to feel lacquer. So my shift in the performance is slight from when I'm on stage. It's not about me, and I do always kind of remember. I kind of remind myself as I go into the room, I'm the employee of APSA or
Yeah.
Chicken Licken, or for that hour or that evening when I'm emceeing them. So I'm there to serve their evening and their employees in whatever way they would like me to do. They might say, listen, they've had a tough time. They need to laugh, go wild. Or please don't do anything that's vaguely, they give you the list. Don't say this, don't do this, don't this. And you think, well, that's all the jokes. So what do you
I
want
was
me to
about
do?
to
I'll get
say,
my name.
you walk on and go, "Hi, my name is Alan Committie. Thank you
Good
and good
night.
night." I'll collect the check on the way out.
100%. But then,
Yeah.
that's what then I find. So I don't, I I just think you serve a different boss in that instance, literally, and that's okay. And some comics don't like that. They think they're selling out, or they think they're undermining their craft, and I think that's fine. But then don't
Mm.
take the work, because
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? Go and do what you do brilliantly in your space. I'm lucky in
Good.
that I think I can switch fairly fluidly
Yeah.
and seamlessly between the two.
Watched you MC an evening, and I'm not going to mention, you know where I'm going with this. I think I'm not going to mention what the event was, but every time you stepped on stage, food was being served. And the sound
Oh,
of
I
knives and
know.
forks and chatter, you could have said rude words and nobody would have heard
No.
anything that you said because they were now focused on the
Correct.
next part of the evening, and you were just ancillary. And I seem to
I
remember saying to you afterwards, I hope you took the check and they're flying you back business class.
well, of course, as you know, I mean, it's the only time when we suddenly understand what it is to be a musician who is told to play, sometimes brilliantly and expertly, while people are eating and no one cares or notices or
Yeah.
even applauds. And, you know, the number of times you tell an event coordinator, please don't put me on during a meal. No, no, it's going to be perfect. It'll make the evening short. And you go, yeah, but you're not going to get laughs. No, no, they'll love you. No, they won't, because they'll have mashed potatoes in their cheeks, you idiot. But, you know, as you say, hold the money up in a pick and pay bag at the back of the room, and that's fine for me as well.
But now, what have you got against currently, it seems, Blair Gowrie and Eden?
yeah. So in Cape Town, it's Plumstead, but that's because Chris Weir lives there. And I think Blair Gowrie, because Bobby Heaney, who I did so much TV work with, lives in Blair Gowrie. But
No,
also,
no, he
does he not?
does.
He's moved.
No, he
He's in
lives up
Linden.
the road from me in Linden. We're all
He's in
close.
Linden.
Bobby, Mark,
Oh, that's
Paul
true.
Slab,
Okay.
we all live within blocks of each other.
Okay. But let's be honest, Linden is not a funny word. Blair Gowrie is hilarious.
It's like why is Dave a funny
Yes.
comedic word? When people
Correct.
want to make a joke on stage, they'll always say, "Oh, my mate Dave." And then it
Dave.
gets a
Correct.
laugh for no apparent reason.
Well, I mean, in the performance you saw, I'll remind you that someone came up with a fantastically funny word, which is a real word. It's a yoga term, kundalani. And
Kundalini, yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
kundalini, exactly.
Kundalini,
And
yeah.
kundalini is just magnificent because it can mean, well, whatever you'd like your little, rude little mind want it to mean, kundalini.
And you exercised your right. I have
I
to
did so.
say that if you've never seen an Alan Committie production, it's known for two things aside from Alan. So it's three things. It's known for interpretive dance. And bloody hell, Al, at 51, you rocked that stage
oh,
yesterday.
bless you. Thank you.
And flip charts. Now,
yeah.
I'm not going to give too much away again, but
Mm,
now you've ramped it up. As the people saw in my opening image, there are now three flip charts.
that's right.
And you're talking about tenuous links. How you get from one thing to another is beyond me. It really and truly is.
Well, that I've got to give some credit to Chris here because when I initially thought about the design for the show, fairly quickly after deciding we'd have Olympic rings that would play a part of the show, is to have the podiums first,
Mm.
second, third, and I said to Chris, you know, it's silly just to have the one flip chart. Maybe we should have three flip charts. And Chris went without even kind of blinking or pausing. Went well, and then you'd obviously use all three flip charts. And I went, oh, I hadn't thought of, well, yes, I suppose I'd have to. And then I said to him, I kind of sat and he said, okay, shall we look at the next bit of material? And I was like, no, now you've put this in my head. I need you to go away. I need to sit down with this. So I sat for a couple of hours. I mean, this made me giggle because I had about 12 pieces of paper. When I start thinking about what the flip charts might look like, and ultimately I'm either going to try and come up with a word that I will kind of brainstorm around, or, and in this case, it's linking two words. So there are variations on the flip charts I've done over the years. And this one felt like the best way would be to link two ideas or two terms. But I then just do variations. I just brainstorm and kind of blue sky think, to use those terrible terms, and write them down. But I write so quickly that when I look back on them a minute later, I can't remember what does that mean? What is that
Yeah.
scribble? I would start getting so frustrated. How did I get from Everest to Donald Duck? This makes no sense. I don't know what that word is. And and then of course, so what I'm doing there is just creating almost 7 or 8 different pathways for
Mm,
me to get from one to the other. And then in front of the audience, I improvise it to an extent because I also want to then include information that I've already received from the audience into the
mm.
flip chart. But that there is a spine that I know, if nothing else, I can get from there to there, and it's going to have a word that I can talk about or whatever. So it's partly a memory exercise, it's partly an improvising exercise. It's a lot of reverse engineering. How do I get this joke from that word and work backwards?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I love that kind of stuff. It's kind of puzzle making 101.
Now, people watching this are going, okay, so David's got a beard. We understand that. He's old, he's trying to bring some sort of gravitas to his look. Alan Committie currently
yeah,
looks like a 70s porn star or a Pretoria policeman. But there
I
is a
know.
reason for that. The reason
Absolutely.
is?
I start rehearsals tomorrow on an Agatha Christie whodunit. And this marvelous little moustache, which is now about 12 weeks in the growing, will soon be waxed up and shaved up under. And it will reveal, I'm hoping, a delightful upturned Hercule Poirot moustache in a couple of weeks. So that's the idea.
So now to segue back into
Yes,
Comedy Gold, that runs for 3 weeks in Johannesburg.
correct. We're until the 16th of March.
And then, and is that whole weeks, Al, or you're only doing sort of Wednesday through Sunday?
Yeah, so at Montecasino, their weeks run from Wednesday to Sunday, and we do a matinee on the Saturday and the Sunday. And those are, the evening shows at 7:30, and the matinee on Saturday is at 4, and the matinee on Sunday is at 3. And people can book through web tickets or call Montecasino Theatre. It's one of the nice perks of working at Montecasino is that the delightful Daryl and Geraldine are on hand. I know some people
Correct.
hate working through websites. They can actually talk to real people who can help them if there's any problems with bookings. But I want to say to people this: you've been very kind in your effusive praise both yesterday and today on the show. But this is one of my favorite shows. I'm very, very proud of it. So come and check it out because it's going to be 3 mad weeks. I think we're going to have a lot of fun in the shows.
Right. So let's toss out a challenge. Go and
Go
see
on.
Alan's show and prove both of us wrong. Send me a text going, it was rubbish. I hated every minute. I dare you, I double dare you to walk out of that theater and say, I hated it. I don't know why I spent the money. Popcorn was expensive. Next time I'm going to bring my own snacks. The guy next to me, in fact, had brought popcorn from home because it was one of those microwave popcorns.
Unbelievable.
You
You
got to
know,
worry
you,
about
you
people
you
arriving.
can't take people anywhere except to the theater. You can take them to the theater.
Alan, I wish you all the very, very best for Comedy Gold. It's currently on at Montecasino at Pieter Toerien's theater and studio, and it's in the big theater. People, don't arrive at Alan's theater like a woman on Saturday did and go, "This doesn't look like My Fair Lady." It's not. Or the mistake that I made, I started walking up the stairs to the studio, which is where you sometimes perform, only to be stopped by my sister who goes, "You're going to see Alan Committie. He's in the big theater. Paul Slab is upstairs."
Listen, I can give good bitter winter as well if I have to.
More of Bitter Winter and Paul Slab's new work on another show. But for now, Alan, thank you so very much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you and to see Comedy Gold. Go and see it, people. In the tough times or the madness that we live in, this is more than a breath of fresh air. Trust me, you can thank me later. Until next time on In Conversation With, I'm David Batsoff, and thanks for joining.